Hello everyone! This is part 2 of creating your very own custom crochet baby blanket. If you haven't already, please be sure to check out part 1 before starting this video. Now let's get started. Okay, so when you first click on the link in the description to lead you to the name pattern, this is what your workspace is going to look like. So you'll see that we have 2 tabs down here. This is the workspace. This is where you're going to put your name letters. And then over here, we also have all of the letters that you will need. So the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to make a copy of this Google Sheet. You will need a Google account in order to do this, but it's a free service that you can get. So just sign into your Google account, click on the link, and then just make a copy so that way you can edit the file. So once you make a copy and you get back to your Google Sheet, you'll be able to edit the copy of the file that you just made. So if you look at the top, you'll see the numbers here, and the numbers go from 1 all the way to 123 because that's the number of stitches that I had going across. So since it's quite a lot of stitches, you might have to zoom out a little bit in order to see the whole pattern. And the way I do that on a Mac is by hitting Command minus, and I think it's the same on a Windows, but you might have to zoom out, but you can always zoom back in and adjust as you need. So obviously this part of the pattern is going to look a little bit different for everyone because everyone's going to be making a different blanket with a different name. But generally speaking, the way that we put the pattern together is going to be the same. So I'm making a blanket for my friend whose baby is named Carter. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the letters template, and then you're going to find the letter that you need, and you're going to see this black outline. So you're going to want to make sure that you click and drag only what's within the black outline. From there, you're going to copy and paste it onto your workspace. So the way you do that is you go to Edit, Copy, and then you go to your workspace. And I would just find some space down here somewhere because we're going to put it on our workspace in a little bit. So just find any space below these striped lines and hit Edit, Paste. You can also do Command C, Command V. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the next letter. So again, in between the black outline, I'm going to find the A, Command C to copy. And I like to leave about 5 stitches in between each letter. Depending on how long the name is and how many letters you're going to end up using, you may have to adjust this a little bit, but you can play around with it and see if you like your letters spaced closer together or further apart. For me, I found that 5 stitches in between each letter is a good amount of spaces for me. So I'm going to go ahead and look for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then on the 6th stitch, I'm going to paste my second letter. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat this with every letter that I'm going to need.
The next one is R. Again, I'm going to count 5 stitches in between. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then T. T, copy and paste. And then look for
So now that we have all of our letters lined up here down below, I'm going to talk through a little bit about why the letters look the way they do. So if we think back to how we do our bubble stitch, you'll remember that we need to do a single crochet in between each of the bubbles. So each of these blue cells represents a bubble stitch, and then any of the white cells represents just a normal single crochet. So if you think of each cell as a stitch on your work, so this will be a single crochet, a bubble, a single crochet, a bubble, so on and so forth. And so it's important that we have that single crochet in between each of the bubble stitches, otherwise the bubbles won't close and it'll just be a cluster of stitches without that closed bubble look. The second thing you'll notice is that there are a couple of rows that are grayed out. And so if you remember back to the work, you will remember that we have to do a row of single crochets between each of the bubble rows so that the bubbles all stay on the same stitch. So if each of these rows is a row on your work, you're going to have to do one row that does bubbles, one row of just single crochet, one row of bubbles, and one with just single crochets. And so that's why there are lines that are blocked out here, and there's also lines that are blocked out on the pattern as well. Okay, so now that we have all of our letters laid out the way we want them to be laid out, you just want to double check that each letter has the same amount of stitches in between each of the letters. And now we're ready to move on to copy and paste this onto our workspace so that's a little bit easier to read. So the way we're going to do this is by highlighting all of the letters, and make sure you only highlight what's within the black outline. So you don't want to have like a random selection like this. You want to make sure that it's exactly only the letters that you need. From there, we're going to copy those letters. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to paste it onto this section of the workspace. This part you kind of have to eyeball a little bit because all of our letters are going to be different lengths and different number of letters. But generally speaking, you want to make sure that you have the same amount of stitches on this side as well as this side. And you may need to adjust here and there, and you might be off by 1 or 2 stitches. But we're just going for like a general center, and we can adjust as we go if we need to. So from here, we're going to copy, and I think that center is roughly here. And so we can double check. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stitches on this side. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stitches on the other side. So I just happened to get that right on the first try, but if you find that let's say you have like 15 stitches on this side and like 3 on this side, all you would need to do is copy those letters again. And this time, instead of hitting copy, you're going to hit cut. And then you're going to find the next space that you want to adjust it to and paste it from there, and it'll adjust as you need to. Or you can always do undo, hit Command Z, and then just try it again. But since I got the letters right the first time, I'm going to leave it as is. So this way our work should be all centered. You're more than welcome to change the colors of the rows however you need them to be so that it's easiest for you to read the pattern. So once my work is laid out on my workboard,
I can go ahead and adjust the colors like this. You just want to make sure you don't cover the bubble stitches, so any of the gray rows you can just change to red or green or whatever color you want.
also now that our work is laid out on our workboard, we don't need this anymore, so you can just delete that by resetting and then clearing the lines. So there we go. That is how you lay out the letters on Google Sheets. Like I said, you may have to tweak and adjust depending on how long the name is. So let's say, for example, you have a really short name that's only 3 letters. You can space them out with more stitches in between, or you can do more single crochets on the side. However you want to lay it out is perfectly acceptable. You just have to make sure that all of the stitches are even, and that is the best way to make it look the best. If you have, let's say, for example, a really long name, you might want to decrease the number of stitches in between each letter, as well as decreasing the stitches on the side. It's kind of something that you'll just have to do trial and error and adjust as you need to. But generally speaking, you just want it to be centered and evenly spaced. Okay, so now that we have our name pattern laid out on Google Sheets, we're now going to go back to our blanket and start making our bubble stitches. So if you look at the pattern, this is actually the bottom of the blanket, so the name is going to be spelled out here just like normal. So if you look over on our Google Sheet, We're basically going to start from this corner and we're going to work our way across this row, this way, all the way across. And then we're going to chain one and single crochet all the way across, and then come back and then do this row all the way across. So if it's easier for you to maybe print out the sheet, you can do that as well, but I usually just like to have it open on my laptop right next to me. So to get started with the pattern, we're first going to look and identify where our first bubble is going to be. So if you look up at the stitch numbers up here, you're going to see that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. On the 13th stitch is where you're going to be making your first bubble. So this is the end of my previous row. I'm going to go ahead and get started on the next row by chaining one, turning our work, and then single crocheting 12 because we're going to do a bubble in the 13th. Okay, so I just did my 12 single crochets. And again, if you have more single crochets you need to do before you get to your bubble, that totally makes sense. This is just the way I'm doing it because this is for this specific name. So just know that as I'm explaining the pattern, yours might be a little bit different, but the gist of it is the same. I'm just using my name as a way to help explain the pattern. So I just finished my 12 single crochets because that's how many single crochets I had here. And from here, I'm going to work my first bubble stitch. So if you remember, we're going to do our bubble stitch by yarning over, pull through 2, yarning over, pull through 2, and repeating that until we have 6 loops on our hook. Okay, now that we have 6 loops on our hook, we're going to yarn over and pull through all of them. And then in order to close our bubble, don't forget we have to do a single crochet in the following stitch. So there we go, that's our first bubble. And if you look back on our pattern, we're going to see that we just did our 12 single crochets, our bubble, and then also the closing single crochet to close out the bubble. So from here, we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 more bubble stitches with a single crochet in between. So I'll walk through the next one with you, but after that, I will meet you at the end of the letter C. So in order to do the second bubble, since we just finished our first one with the closed single crochet, we're going to do yarn over, pull through 2 until you have 6 loops. So that's our second bubble. We're going to close it off with a single crochet. And we're going to do 3 more bubbles. So I'll go ahead and meet you when we're at this point of the pattern, which is the end of your first letter. So again, yours might look a little bit different than mine, but if I'm just following the pattern, I just have to do 5 bubble crochets. So I'll meet you when we're at the end over here. All right, so I just finished up my 5th bubble, and if you look on the other side of the work, you can see that our bubbles are forming very nicely. And essentially what we've just done is we've single crocheted across here and finished up all of these bubbles, and this is where we are at. So in order to do the next bubble, you're just going to keep following the pattern along the row. So we just closed our bubble off with that single crochet, so now we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 single crochets before we do our next bubble. So essentially all we're doing is working stitch by stitch all the way across this row until you reach the very end. So our patterns are going to look really different because we're all going to have different names that we're working on, but you essentially just want to follow this first row all the way across until you're at the end. Make sure you double count your stitches just to make sure that you're on the right track, because it is really frustrating to have to undo your work if you realize that you're off by a single stitch or anything like that. So make sure you double count your work, especially in the first few rows. So go ahead and keep following that pattern, and then I will meet you when we are at the end of the row and it's time to start the next one. So I just finished up that row of bubbles, and if you flip the work over, you will see that we have these little bubbles that are starting to form. They don't look like much yet because it's only the first row, but slowly but surely they will turn into the letters that we have lined out in our pattern. So if you look at our pattern over here, you'll see that we had just completed this row of bubbles. And again, you're more than welcome to just double check your stitches. It's always good to just count and double check that you're on the right path. So now that we finished that row, we're going to move on to the second one. And as you can see, it's a red line row. So that basically means we're just going to do single crochets all the way across, which I have actually already started, but it's pretty straightforward. You just do single crochets into every stitch, including the bubble stitch, all the way across. And so go ahead and keep working on that, and I will meet you at the end of the row. I'll show you once really quick how to single crochet on top of a bubble. So if you just look, you'll see that's the closing single crochet into there, and then this bubble stitch is a little longer, or it looks a little longer, but it's just a normal stitch. So yeah, go ahead and keep doing single crochets all the way across, and then I will meet you again at the end of this row. Okay, so we just finished up our row of single crochets, and so now we're going to work on our next bubble row. So if you look at the pattern, you'll see here we have our next set of bubbles that we will need to work across. So from the beginning, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 single crochets followed by a bubble, and then you count the number of single crochets, the next bubble, and it's exactly the same as the way we did the first row of bubbles. So from here, since all of our patterns are going to look really different, I'm just going to let you guys work through the entire name portion. And once you get to the very end, which would be right about here, you're just going to do the same number of single crochets as you did here. So I did 3 double crochets before starting the bubbles. So once you do that, you're just going to do 3 double crochets after you finish the bubbles. So that way it's the same amount of space. After that, I'm going to show you how to switch back into the dark blue color to work on your stripes. So go ahead and keep working on your pattern, and I will see you back then. Okay, so here is what our work is looking like so far. So as you can see, we have the names spelled out nicely. And I also completed my 3 rows of single crochets after I finished the letters. So yeah, this is where we're at so far. And now I'm going to teach you how to finish off this name section. If you guys remember from this previous row down here, we had to do some funky things in order to accommodate for the shell stitches. And so I'm going to teach you how to do that right now. So right now is also a good time to count all of your single crochets across. You should have 123. If you had a different number starting off, obviously yours will be different as well, but since I started with 123, I just double counted and made sure that I also have 123. So essentially the way we're going to finish off this section is by treating this row as if it were just a row of chains, and start off our blanket stitches the way we did in the very beginning. So I'll show you what I mean by that, but first I'm going to finish off my last single crochets for the row. And finish that off. So now we're just going to start building our blanket stitches right on top of these single crochets. The way we're going to do that is we're going to chain 2. We're going to flip our work. We're going to flip our work and let me get situated over here. All right. We're going to flip our work, and then you're going to find the 3rd stitch from the hook, which is also the first single crochet from the row, and you're going to insert 2 double crochets into that first single crochet. From there, you're going to skip 2 stitches, and in the 3rd stitch, you're going to insert 1 single crochet and 2 double crochets into that same stitch. Oops. So 1 single crochet and 2 double crochets. Same thing again, you're going to skip 2 single crochets, insert 1 single crochet and 2 double crochets. So this should look pretty familiar. So you're going to go ahead and keep following that pattern, and I will meet you when we are at the end of the row. Okay, so now we are ending our row, and as you can see, we have our cute little blanket stitches starting to form again. So the way we're going to finish off this row is just by doing 1 single crochet, but we're not going to finish off the single crochet in its entirety. We're just going to leave it like this so that there's 2 loops on the hook. From there, we're going to cut our yarn. And then here is where we're going to start back up with our stripe stitches. So if you guys remember from the previous rounds, we did 3 rows of dark blue, 2 rows of white, and then 3 rows of dark blue. So we're basically just going to repeat that exact pattern again. So we're going to go ahead and grab your dark blue color, and you're going to attach it to the end of your row. And from here, we're going to keep going with the pattern just like we've been doing, exactly the same. So we're going to chain 2, we're going to flip our work, find that first single crochet from the previous row, this, and then we're just going to double crochet 2, and then keep following that same exact blanket stitch pattern. So you're going to find that single crochet from the previous row, insert 1 single crochet, followed by 2 double crochets. Same thing again, find the next single crochet, insert 2 double crochets, and we're just going to keep following this pattern. So again, we're going to do 3 rows of dark blue, 2 rows of white, and then 3 more rows of dark blue. So go ahead and keep following that pattern, and I will meet you when we are done with the stripes. Okay, so I just finished up my row of stripes up here, and my work right now is measuring about 13¼ inches. And so I'm going to go ahead and finish off this row with you guys. So essentially what we're going to do next is we're going to go back to this light blue color, and this is the middle part of the blanket that's actually going to end up being pretty much the majority of your work. And the way you start it off is exactly the same as we have been doing with the other colors. So we finish off the row by inserting a single crochet, snipping our work, and then we're going to find the next color, And then we're just gonna reattach it to the blanket, just like we have been doing with all of the other colors. We are going to chain 2, flip our work, insert 2 double crochets into that first single crochet stitch, and you're going to find the next single crochet, insert 1 single crochet followed by 2 double crochets. So the exact same blanket stitch pattern that we have been doing all the way until you are happy with the length of the middle portion of your blanket. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that for a little bit, and I'll come back and let you know how many rows I ended up doing and how long the project ended up being when I was happy with the length. So go ahead and keep working that middle part until you have enough rows that you're happy with the length. Okay, so here is what the blanket is looking like now that I have been crocheting this middle part for a while. So I ended up crocheting to have this middle part be roughly about 15 inches. And the reason I did that is because this little section over here, the blue part is about 5 inches, and so I wanted it to be about 3 times the length of that, but that's just a personal preference. I think that's just how I think it looks best, but you're welcome to do any kind of length and proportion that you want to do. Right now, the blanket is unblocked, but it is measuring about 28 inches. So at this point of the blanket, all we need to do is we're going to switch colors and do the stripes again. So now that I'm happy with this length over here, I'm going to switch to the dark blue color again, do 3 rows of that, 2 rows of white, and then 3 more rows of dark blue. And so we're just going to keep changing the colors the same way we have been. And then once we complete those stripes, I'll meet you guys back here so we can start working on the letters again. It's a little bit different than the first time we did it, so be sure to stick around for the video and watch through that, but I will meet you when we are done with the end of the stripes. Okay, so here's what our blanket is looking like now. I just finished up the row of stripes over here. So our next step is basically just going to be to repeat the name portion. The only difference being that the name is now going to be upside down. So we're not going to follow the same pattern that we did on this side. We're going to follow the ones that is flipped the other way around. So, but in order to get started with the name portion, if you remember from the video earlier, we basically did a row of stitches to help flatten everything out, followed by 3 rows of single crochets. So if you want to rewind the video to familiarize yourself with how to do that, it's essentially the one where we do a double crochet on top of every single crochet and then a double crochet on top of every single crochet. So if you want to rewind the video, it's going to be the exact same pattern that we follow when we first made our name part. So go ahead and do that. So make the row of making the stitches straight and then do 3 rows of single crochets, and I will meet you over there to start working on the upside down names. So one last thing to remember before you get started on the name portion is to keep track of which side of the blanket the bubbles are on. So I was about to start making the names and I realized when I did the three rows of single crochets over here that the bubbles were going to be on the wrong side of the blanket. So I'm just going to go ahead and make 1 extra row. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference in the blanket overall. So yeah, just be sure to make sure that your bubbles are forming on the correct side of the blanket before you get started. Okay, so now that you've double checked that you are working on the correct side, remember you want to make sure that your bubbles are forming on the same side of the blanket and making sure that it's not on opposite sides. So now we're essentially going to go back to the Google Sheets where we have our name laid out. And if you remember when we first started the blanket, we started at this bottom corner. So now, depending on which side you are working on, we're essentially just going to read the pattern, but this time we're going to start from the top right corner. and then we're going to count our rows going this way and then following the pattern as we have before. These little numbers here are just ways that I've filled out. I would count each cell and then write the number down so that I don't have to recount it each time. So the pattern is going to be followed the exact same way, but rather than starting from the bottom up, we're now just going to start from the top down. At this point in the pattern, we already learned all the stitches that we will need to know in order to finish the blanket. So once you've finished completing your name portion, we essentially just need to do the stripes again and then the bottom portion before you're ready to finish off the blanket. Thank you for following along with this custom crochet baby blanket pattern.